Okay, I think we'll kick off now. Thank you for joining us today to learn more about Xref. My name is Trina Hunter and I'm part of the ATL Client Success team. Please be aware that we've disabled the participant audio for the duration of the webinar. But throughout the webinar, you can ask questions through the Q&A functionality, and we'll answer those throughout the webinar. Today we have Marley, Merton and Nathan Pye from Xref with us to talk to you about streamlining your recruitment processes. And I'll hand straight over to Marley to kick off.
Awesome. Thanks, Trina, and thank you to the SnapHire team. It's awesome to be here to talk to you guys about Xref and how we sit in the SnapHire system. It's been a really great integration with SnapHire, enabling the use of our system to operate seamlessly out of the SnapHire ATS. So what we're going to do today is talk to you a little bit more about automated reference checking, how it works, you know, how it changes some of the process in terms of, you know, comparing to your phone-based referencing methods, and how this fits into the SnapHire system. So just to, So to start with, hello from us. As you can probably tell, I am also a Kiwi based here in Sydney, and I am looking after the New Zealand market. So I've been with Xref for about coming up to 2 years, and I've really focused on our Kiwi clients. So it's been really awesome to work with. You know, there's a fair few people who are using Xref out of the SnapHire system, and you know, right across the country, which is great. And then we also have Nathan Pye here. So,
hi, my name's Nathan. I am unfortunately not a Kiwi. However, I have been here at Xref for over 2 years now, and my role is as the integrations program manager. I'm responsible for developing technology partnerships and integrations with partners.
Thank you, Nathan. So I'm not sure of everyone here that we have your familiarity of Xref, so I thought we'd just take it from the top and give you a little bit of a backstory about Xref, where we started off and why we started out. So we've been around since 2009, and our platform is an automated reference checking solution that was actually built by recruiters and talent acquisition professionals who really saw a lot of the pain and problems that are associated with reference checking. So this slide here gives you a bit of an indication of our global reach. So we're pretty proud of how far we've come in the past 10 years. These green dots indicate all the places that Xref has been used. And we do have over 1,000 clients globally now who are using the Xref platform. So one of the key things with Xref, without going into too much detail just yet, is we have changed up the process. We've got the candidates a little bit more involved, so there's more engagement, better experience for candidates by taking it all online in that process. So where I wanted to start with was a bit more, is asking the question about the value of reference checking in the recruitment process. So I think this is a really important question to ask, and to ask ourselves, how important are reference checking in the process and what purpose do they serve? I ask this and encourage you to think about this, because increasingly we're starting to see and hear clients who tell us that it's become very much a tick box exercise. It's more of an afterthought. A task that's always been done happens at the very end of the process, and perhaps when a decision's already been made. So it almost acts as a quick phone call to verify that they're not, you know, an absolute loose cannon, for lack of a better term. And I think some of the value has been lost in the reference checking process. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that, you know, there is a lot of difficulty faced in being able to speak to people, being able to catch referees, and it's quite an arduous process. So I'm sure that we've all been here at some point. What I tend to say is that a really big difficulty with the phone-based reference checking process is actually not necessarily the reference check itself, but it's all the work that encompasses it. So, you know, the back and forth, trying to get the correct person from the candidate, the setting up a time to speak, arranging two people's diaries at the same time, running the reference, typing it up, formatting it, sending it on. And so we actually tend to say that process in itself per reference can take up to an hour's of productivity. So we can see how people, you know, only want to reference the final candidate because it takes a really, really long time to actually do this task. It is highly administrative. You know, some people have their hiring managers doing it, and that's quite often when reference checking sort of stops happening altogether. So, you know, if you're looking at, say, 20 hires a year, that, you know, that's about 40 hours of productivity that is spent in what we say is pretty highly administrative work. And, you know, with that, and if there are delays, we tend to say that, you know, hiring delays can happen in this process. We can lose candidates in this process, and time to hire is increasingly becoming a crucial metric, you know, that people are reporting on internally in terms of productivity and efficiency of HR and recruitment functions. It's really important to keep your time to hire low, and when you've got that bottleneck of the recruitment process, it impacts that. And, you know, that has all sorts of effects, like, you know, having to re-recruit because you could potentially lose candidates in that process. You know, you've found some really great candidates, but then you're reaching these roadblocks and hurdles. So aside from the administrative side as well, we also say that the phone-based reference checking process is actually fraught with a lot of risk. We produced a white paper about a year ago, and 7 out of 10 candidates actually admitted to exploiting flaws in the reference checking process. Because if we think about it, how do we really know that the person at the other end of the phone isn't a candidate's friend, or that they actually worked for the candidate for long enough to provide valuable feedback on their suitability of the role? So when we're calling mobiles, it can be really difficult to determine exactly who's at the end of the line. And so if we think about the amount of time that's being invested to gather insights from, you know, potentially fake references, where is the value in that process? So after 10 years in business and tens of thousands of reference checks that have been taken through the platform, you know, we are averaging about 10,000 reference checks coming through us a week. We've refined the process and continued to do so to help businesses optimize the processes. So we've streamlined and automated the reference checking process in order to get references back in 24 to 30 hours. So reducing some of those hiring delays. We've been able to build in some fraud detection, so you can be confident that the references that you're obtaining are from the right people. And we've then improved the employer experience as well. So we've been able to speed that up so that it's only a 15-second process from you. So we're taking away 2 hours of time so that you can focus on the things that matter, like business partnering, you know, sourcing hard to find candidates, but being able to get reference checks back really, really quickly of a higher quality, because you know they're from the right people. So really, in a nutshell, sorry, I've just skipped a slide. In a nutshell, if we look at the process, this is what we say it typically looks like. So currently, in the form that we have at the moment, what you tend to have is a candidate sitting in the outskirts of the process. You've got the employer / recruiter, yourselves, who are actually doing a lot of that work in order to obtain reference checking back. So with that back and forth that we do experience, you know, the phone tag, arranging two people's diaries to speak, you've got that 2 hour productivity, and your turnaround time is 3 days. But I think the key with that is that it can be really inconsistent. I mean, I'm sure you've been able to get a reference within the same day, but then you're waiting on that second reference for, you know, a couple of weeks. So what we have done, and the biggest change that we have made to this process to improve it, is we've shifted the candidate from being in the outskirts of that process, and we've popped them right into the middle of the workflow. So we've said, actually, this candidate can be more involved in the process and in driving the reference checking process. And that helps to speed it up, reduce the pressures on you guys as a, you know, as a TA manager or even a hiring manager, but also keep that candidate informed of the process. So, you know, there's a lot about candidate experience at the moment. And currently, when we're sitting here, you know, that candidate is left out of the process if there is any hiring delays. So it's super, super simple how it works. And what I'm going to do is I actually show you really quickly how this workflow works in terms of the Xref platform in its own form. And then we'll talk to you about how that's done out of SnapHire. But I think it's important to quickly go through the candidate and the referee process before we show you how requesting as an employer works. So essentially what happens is when you send out a request, you're sending a request directly to a candidate. So you actually stipulate what it is that you want from that candidate. So it might be a case of 2 references in, you know, as a minimum within the past 5 years. So you're actually telling that candidate what it is that you will and won't accept, which helps to ensure that you are, you know, those candidates are providing the right references for you. You'll input the candidate's details. Now, out of SnapHire, you don't need to do that part because you've got the candidate's details already in your system. But it's as simple as setting that up, setting some communication to that candidate saying, hey, candidate, could you please provide X, Y, and Z? So you still have control over that. And then hit send a request. And at that point, and this is where the major difference lies, is that candidate actually gets a request from you saying, hey, we're moving to reference checks. You need to input your referee details into the system here. And so what happens as soon as you've sent that request out is it means that we've got tracking that starts in the background here. And that helps with the validation and verification to ensure referees and candidates are who they say they are. So you send it out to the candidate, they'll put all their referee details in as per what you requested, sign terms and conditions, say, yes, everything's accurate and correct. So you get that written validation from that candidate, and then they'll hit submit. So they'll put John Smith, Rachel Taylor, and Sam Keane as their 3 references. They'll hit submit, and as soon as they submit, what happens is it sends a request out to all 3 of these referees directly. So that saves you as the employer having to go back and forth with John, Rachel, and Sam, doing each reference one at a time, perhaps doing it outside of work hours, not knowing if it's exactly, you know, if that's the person at the other end of the mobile phone, because it sends that request straight out to those referees who can then jump in. They verify the candidate's details, so they'll verify, you know, that the start and end dates are correct, perhaps make amendments if they don't think they're quite right, you know, verify their job title. And that referee actually verifies and indicates that everything they're providing is accurate and correct. So what's really interesting about the platform is you get full visibility of that engagement as well of the referees. And so we see a lot of referees come in at the validation stage and then leave the platform, come back a little bit later on. And we see a lot of, you know, verifications where perhaps they've said, no, the candidate dates are slightly off, I need to change this. And we see it down to a single date change. And that says to us that these referees have the time to be able to go and check their records, ensure they're inputting the exact accurate data, and ensure what they're saying is true and accurate. Then they'll go through, they'll complete the reference check, and most of our referees that we see in the platform will complete this outside of work hours. So it just gives your referees the ability to sit down, have a bit of time, provide detailed and well thought out answers. And we tend to see an increase in word count that's coming back as well. So it's almost like it's a trip advisor for candidates and referees, in a sense that, you know, they're more comfortable with writing down these insights at a time that suits them. So then they'll complete their reference check, and then that there, as soon as they hit submit, is viewable out of the SnapHire, or out of the Xref dashboard. So you as the employer see the completed reference, and you've got that there. The candidate gets notified of the progress, however, they never see the reference check, but I think that's really important because it keeps them informed and engaged of the process. So your risk of losing that candidate in, you know, delayed process significantly decreases because we're getting those reference checks back quicker, and if there are any delays, that candidate knows that it's waiting on their referees. So how this works in SnapHire is really, really simple. So what happens is we are able to map Xref to your workflows that you have in SnapHire. So essentially we will set up Xref into your workflow. We'll start it at a point of your workflow, and you can send those requests directly out of the SnapHire dashboard. So this is super, super simple. And while we say in the Xref platform, it takes you just 20 seconds, in SnapHire, it takes no more than 5 to 10 seconds, because it's as simple as clicking, hey, is this a graduate candidate that I'm referencing? Or is it a blue collar candidate that I'm referencing? Is it a head office candidate that I'm referencing? So we'll build out the appropriate packages with the appropriate reference questionnaires. It's as simple as a click of a button, and that will drive that workflow process. And then we get a progress tracking measure. So you can see in those little icons, which are visible here, they actually change. So as soon as the candidate goes in and actions their part, you'll see a status and in progress change. And then as soon as the referee has completed their part, you'll get a completed note. So you can then click onto that, you'll see the completed reference, and then you've got your reference checking back. And so what's really interesting in this process when we're sending out the request and we're sending it to the candidate and then the referee, is in the background we've got fraud detection algorithms. So this is where we're ensuring that reference checks are coming back from the appropriate person by having the ability to detect when a candidate is providing, you know, a friend or family, or even perhaps making an email up and doing it themselves because they see it as an opportunity. And so we're doing all sorts of things like tracking the candidate and the referee's location, what device they're using, the email address, what browser they're using. And so any double up or discrepancies in that, we'll flag at our end and we alert you to that in real time. And that's really interesting. I've got a bit of a stat over here where we had a client of ours who actually were able to not hire 16 candidates in the space of a year who had acted fraudulently in the reference checking process. Now, had that been references on mobile phones, they'd never uncovered fraudulent reference checks in the past. So that's a really, really interesting, you know, piece of client feedback that they published on their LinkedIn, and we're really proud of the ability to be able to reduce the likelihood of mishire, which is really, really quite an expensive thing to happen, 16 times over. And our average rate is 3 in every 100 reference checks we're detecting as fraudulent. That's a bit of an overview of the reference Xref platform. So what I'll do is hand over to Nathan, who can talk to you really quickly about getting started and how this works in the SnapHire platform.
Thanks, Marley, for that illuminating description of the Xref process and how it works within SnapHire. The great news is that if you're an existing SnapHire customer, getting the Xref integration up and running really could not be any easier. The first step is to head to the Apps tab within SnapHire. From here, you need to download and install both of the AOTL Assessment Hub tool and the Xref app. By doing this, you'll trigger the Xref team to swing into action, and then our team will configure and set up the integration in the background for you. We'll also take the opportunity to set up your packages. You'll need to select an icon. If you remember the frame that Marley showed you earlier, they were the fantastic little icons for the different reference types. You'll need to choose an icon to represent the reference package that you want, but with over 20 icons to choose from, you'll be spoiled for choice. Our team can also help you with some useful suggestions if you need them. With the apps and packages in place, the next step is to configure your field mappings and assessment buckets so that the Xref process is tailored to your workflow. Again, if you remember the slide that Marley showed you, we can tailor exactly the point within your workflow that you want the Xref process to start. We've got exceptional control over where this happens, and we're able to assist in setting that up for you. It's very straightforward, and if you get stuck, both Xref and AOTL can help you out there. This is also the point where you can set up your single sign-on as well if you require it. Not everybody does. Once you've got all of this in place, you're pretty much good to go. The Xref team will contact you, will run through a very quick test request with you to make sure everything is working, make sure candidates are receiving the required emails, make sure the notes to candidates are all set up as well. And with that all in place, we can wave you off on the journey to smarter, more confident candidate referencing. But remember, you're never on your own. The Xref team will always be here to help if you need assistance in the future. I think that's pretty much it from me. Back to Marley.
Yeah, so look, that's it really in a nutshell. It has been a very high level overview. We certainly can go into more detail at a later date with that. However, I hope that that has really helped, and I encourage any questions to be asked. Which it appears that I do. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of Zoom trouble here. Sorry, everyone. I have 2 questions sitting in my Q&A box, but I can't open the Q&A box to see the questions.
How about I assist?
Sebastian Boa. So the whole ref check process happens online. Exactly, yes. So by automating the reference checking process, we do bring it entirely online. So when a referee is providing feedback, it is all email driven, and they are providing feedback in the written format. Now, it is really different through the Xref platform than it is to, say, perhaps sending out a Word document directly to the referee. Because it's a completely mobile optimized platform. So we get a lot of referees who have used it, who are perhaps TA managers, who love the experience because it gives them that ability to be able to complete it, you know, in their own time through a really nice, easy to use app. And that app doesn't require any logins either. So, you know, we see a lot of referees coming in, completing 2 to 3 questions, and then coming back a few hours later when they have a little bit more time. Fantastic. Another question's come through. What if I need clarification or ask something additional based on the referee's answers? So that's a really, really good question. And with Xref, we're not saying, you know, don't ever speak to anyone ever again. You still get those referee details. So if there's something out of a reference form that you think, hey, actually, I want to go into that a bit further, you've got that full validated referee details. So you can actually contact them, and we usually encourage you to ask a question which is along the lines of prospective employer may wish to contact you for further information. Are you happy for them to do so, and when is the best time? And referees tend to actually tell you exactly when they are and when they aren't available in that question. So you've then got the opportunity to follow up. And so what it means is that you'll probably be following up on, you know, say 5 to 10% of those referees, opposed to spending 2 hours of time on the other 80 to 90% of reference checks. Any further questions? Do we have another one that's come through? Yeah. So in the case of people who are perhaps outsourcing reference checks, so where times, you know, where time is perhaps not the problem because it's already been done outsourced, essentially, I guess the key reason that Xref was initially built was actually to increase the validation and verification around reference checking. So in terms of the process, and by putting the candidate into the driver's seat, we're sending that request out, and that creates the tracking that's only available in the online format. So as soon as you send that request out, it goes out to the candidate. That's where the background verification and tracking comes in place, and that's where this online platform allows the detection of potentially fraudulent candidates providing reference checks. So perhaps they're providing friend or family, you know, because they can't provide actual reference checks from their previous employer. So that's where the value add, if time is not an issue at the moment, is due to the fact that, you know, we are able to detect when feedback is being obtained from the wrong people. So looks like, are there any further questions? I don't have any more coming through at the moment, but I do welcome any further questions if they do come up down the track. You can email them to myself or Trina, and we're certainly more than happy to. Oh, actually, we have had another question. The ability to tailor questions to whether the referee is a work or character reference. Yes, absolutely. So the whole process is completely customizable, and so are the questions. So we can build an unlimited amount of questionnaires into the platform based on your different role types. And actually, one thing I didn't mention is even when you are sending each individual request, you can tailor communication directly to that referee. But yes, you can. So in the case of graduates, you know, perhaps where you want to work or a character reference, we just set that up. So one reference comes from an employment and one's a character.
There are lots of different questionnaire types available, aren't there? We've got academic ones as well. If a candidate has spent a specific amount of time at a university or in higher education or further education, then they can utilise the academic reference rather than the employment reference if required. I noticed that Sebastian asked up here, he mentioned verbal contact. It might be a good opportunity to just mention the sentiment engine as well, to how the sentiment engine works. A lot of people like to get the feel of a referee's voice when they're talking to them. They can get a feel for the way that the referee is talking about a candidate. What we've implemented in the Xref platform is a sentiment engine that analyzes the text that a referee uses in their responses to a reference question. This gives us the idea to evaluate and get a sense of how positive or negative or neutral the referee's responses are to that question. And this is our way of essentially not replacing the word or the verbal discussion that you would have with a candidate, but implementing that verbal communication in an online written format.
Awesome, thank you.
No problem.
So Okay, we had a question here as well. So getting hold of a referee on the phone is one of your points of difference, so to speak. But a referee can also be busy and not answering the questions online for a number of days. How do you manage that? So that's a really good question, and I suppose that actually does bring up something that I haven't mentioned, is we do, by putting the candidate in the driver's seat, it encourages that candidate to be following up with their referees. But what we also have to supplement this is automated email reminders, which are gentle nudges to the candidate and the referee, reminding them that the process needs to be completed in order for that candidate to potentially obtain employment. So we have those reminders that are going at 24, 36, 48 and 64 hours. And this will just gently nudge. So in the case that a candidate's input the referee details and we're waiting on it from the referee, they'll get those notifications, and that just resupplies them with the link so that they can quickly and easily access that link at the top of their inbox by those reminder emails. So with that, and in that candidate driven process, we have a 97% deliverability rate. So, you know, the deliverability is really high, and what we're tending to see is that referees are having the preference of being able to complete it in their own time, and they do tackle it in time chunks. They'll go in and they'll do a few questions, come back to a few more later on when they have a bit more time.
The beauty of the Xref process as well is that all through what we call the life cycle of the reference, we're recording those events in our platform. So you will always be able to see exactly what has happened with a specific reference process. And this is also a great aspect in terms of a candidate that may be playing for time. They may be waiting to hear from another job. Very often they'll say, I haven't engaged with the process, I've not received the email, yet you will be able to log on, you'll be able to evaluate the life cycle and identify where a candidate is perhaps not being, or is being, let's say, economical with the truth with you because they are waiting for another offer, they're waiting for something else to happen before they push on with the process that you've asked them to complete.
Cool. I'll wait one more moment just to see if any more questions come up, but lots of really good questions from everyone so far, so thank you. Yeah, I think we'll wrap up there. So as I mentioned, feel free to ask anything further to myself and Trina, but thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate you jumping on to hear a bit more about Xref and how it does fit into that SnapHire process. So I'll hand it back to Trina, and thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Trina for putting this all together for us.
Okay, thanks Xref team. We'll send a copy of this webinar and any further information out to you shortly. Otherwise, as Marley said, feel free to contact us at SnapHire or Xref, and have a great day.
Thank you.